The siren had stopped wailing a few minutes ago, but the tension still screamed across the quiet suburban street like a storm waiting to break. Red and blue lights strobed across the manicured lawns and pastel-colored homes of Meadow Ridge Lane, where quietude was the norm and every cracked driveway told stories of bike rides, Amazon packages, and late-night walks. But tonight, everything felt different. Jamal stood stiff on the curb, his basketball still rolling gently behind him, forgotten. The sweat from practice hadn't dried on his brow yet. His heart pounded not from exertion, but from something colder, something he'd felt before but never gotten used to. The coldness of being seen, but not recognized. A white officer stood over him, stocky build, closely shaved hair, jaw tight with practiced suspicion. His name tag read T. Warren, but to Jamal, he was just another uniform with a badge and assumptions. The officer's left hand clamped around Jamal's wrist like a vice. He wasn't rough, but he wasn't gentle either. His grip said, "You don't control this now." "I do." "Special Forces, huh?" the officer said with a sharp laugh. It wasn't the kind of laugh you shared after a good joke, it was the kind that cut. "You expect me to believe that, kid?" Jamal didn't flinch. He'd heard that tone before. He kept his chin raised, refusing to let his voice tremble. "My dad's in Special Forces. He's gonna be here any second." The officer leaned down slightly, his face too close, his breath warm and sour with coffee and confidence. "Yeah, sure he is." To him, it was absurd, comedy, even, that this boy from this neighborhood, wearing old sneakers and a scuffed backpack, had a father who served among the elite. The glow from the police cruiser bounced off the nearby houses, catching blinds that had suddenly tilted open in perfect synchronization, like the slow blink of the neighborhood's collective eye. Behind curtains and through narrow gaps, Meadow Ridge's residents peeked out, curious, cautious, and quiet. Some of them knew Jamal. He was the kid who rode his bike with too much speed down the sidewalk. The one who helped Ms. Kimberly carry groceries without being asked. The one who waved at the mailman like it was the most important part of his day. But none of them stepped outside. The hum of the patrol car's idling engine filled the space between words, between questions and accusations. Every once in a while, a dog barked in the distance, or the wind rustled through the tree-lined sidewalks. But mostly, the silence roared. Jamal's hand flexed beneath the officer's grip. He wanted to speak again, but every time he opened his mouth, the man's narrowed eyes told him careful. So he stayed still, his muscles coiled, his breath shallow. Above the roofs, the sky faded from dusk to dark. The street lamps flickered to life. The world kept turning, but on this street, time had frozen. All eyes on the boy. All judgment deferred to the badge. The accusation came casually, like an afterthought, but it landed like a slap. "You match the description," Officer Warren had said when he first pulled up. No sirens, just a slow roll, window down, hand already near his belt. Jamal had just turned the corner, his ball tucked under one arm, earbuds in, hoodie down. He'd seen the car creeping before he heard it, and instinct told him to brace. He paused, lowered the volume on his music, offered a small wave. "Evenin', officer." The words barely left his mouth before the command hit. "Stop right there." Jamal obeyed. He'd learned early, when in doubt, don't move. Don't talk unless asked. Keep hands visible. Be polite. Survive. "What's your name?" "Jamal Franklin, sir." "Where you headed?" "Home. Just got done with practice." The officer stepped out, his eyes scanning Jamal's bike like it was stolen treasure. "Got ID?" Jamal blinked. "I'm 14. Warren nodded slowly, then gestured to the bike. "Where'd you get it?" "My mom. Birthday last year." "Mind if I check the serial number?" Jamal hesitated. That felt like a trap. "It's mine. And I said we got a call about a bike stolen about 2 blocks from here. Black kid, gray hoodie, Nike shoes." "That you?" Jamal looked down. "Gray hoodie. Nike shoes. Check, check." He knew what came next. He didn't run. He didn't argue. But he made a mistake. He mentioned his dad. And that's when the laughter started. For Jamal, this wasn't just about a bike. It never was. It was about being seen, really seen, for who he was. Not just a silhouette under a street lamp, but a person. A student. A teammate. A son. But to Officer Warren, he was a suspect by default. His presence was a disruption. A black boy on a nice street, after sunset, on a decent-looking bike? Suspicious. Too suspicious. "You got any weapons on you?" "No, sir." "Drugs?" "No." "You sure about that?" Jamal clenched his jaw. "Yes, sir." Warren didn't believe him. He didn't want to. Belief would require confronting the idea that maybe, just maybe, his assumptions were wrong. That maybe the system that gave him the power to grip this boy's wrist without a second thought was the same system that made kids like Jamal walk home with their shoulders tight and eyes wary. This wasn't the first time Jamal had felt it. At the mall. At school. That time he got followed in the corner store. But this felt worse. Because this time, he wasn't alone. There were witnesses, silent and invisible. People who could have said something. But didn't. And Warren, he was just doing his job. That's what they always said. Despite everything, the grip, the mocking, the invisible crowd, Jamal didn't cry. He didn't beg. He didn't shout, even though his throat burned with the urge to scream. He stood still. Firm. His chin didn't drop. "My dad's coming," he repeated. "He's Special Forces." It wasn't bravado. It wasn't a bluff. It was the truth. His father, Master Sergeant Elijah Franklin, had served 3 tours overseas. He'd jumped out of helicopters into hostile territory, disarmed bombs, rescued hostages. And now, he was on his way home after a flight delay, already driving through the city when Jamal texted him, "Dad. Need you. Cops stopped me. Won't believe me." And when Elijah Franklin received that message, he didn't call. He didn't ask questions. He moved. But back on Meadow Ridge Lane, Officer Warren didn't believe in silent strength. He believed in control. He had the badge. The cruiser. The authority. "You think your dad's gonna scare me, kid?" Jamal looked him square in the eye. "He doesn't need to scare you. He just needs to see you." The air between them was thick now, charged. Jamal's wrist hurt, but he didn't complain. His voice stayed calm, steady. Warren hated that. Hated the defiance in the boy's stillness. The quiet resistance. The belief in something bigger. He reached for his cuffs. "Let's take a ride downtown, then. We'll see what Daddy has to say about that." And that's when they both heard it, the low growl of a heavy engine. Tires screeching. Black SUV rounding the corner like a thundercloud on wheels. Jamal didn't even smile. He just whispered, "He's here." Officer Warren's smirk lingered like a stain, 1 part arrogance, 2 parts disbelief. He wasn't just doubting Jamal's claim about his father. He was enjoying it. In his mind, it was a lie told by a scared kid caught red-handed, a bluff meant to dodge consequences. He'd seen this type before, or so he thought. The smirk was more than just an expression, it was a performance. A performance for the neighbors hiding behind glass and curtains, for the body cam he probably forgot was still on, and most of all, for himself. He needed to believe in his own superiority. Needed to believe that this boy's confidence was just false bravado. "Special Forces," Warren muttered, chuckling again. "Right." He rocked back on his heels, arms crossed now that the cuffs dangled ominously in one hand. It was the posture of someone who thought he'd already won. He didn't see the storm on the horizon, the heavy footsteps, the sudden shift in the air, the quiet erasure of certainty. Because behind that smirk was a man who had never been challenged by someone who didn't flinch. And Jamal wasn't flinching. Master Sergeant Elijah Franklin had walked through war zones calmer than most men walk through grocery stores. He wasn't the type to boast. He never had to. His presence alone could settle a room, or ignite it. His file read like a novel: Special Forces, 75th Ranger Regiment, fluent in 3 languages, expert in urban and jungle warfare, 10-year veteran with honors. But his greatest achievement was being a father to Jamal. When the text from his son came through, Elijah didn't question it. He didn't ask for details. He just moved, quick, direct, focused. Years of training kicked in. Situational awareness. Target assessment. The route to Meadow Ridge Lane. He didn't need to bring a weapon. He was one. The moment he turned onto the street, he could read the entire situation like a debriefing file. Patrol car lights still flashing. One officer in dominant posture. Jamal standing stiff. Wrist restrained. Neighbors watching but doing nothing. Elijah parked behind the cruiser, put the vehicle in park, and stepped out. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He walked. Boots on pavement. Measured. Deliberate. Like thunder without rain. Officer Warren didn't notice the SUV at first. He was too busy scanning Jamal for cracks in the armor, waiting for the boy to stammer, to apologize, to shrink. But then the noise caught his attention. The screech. The shift in atmosphere. He turned just as the black SUV came to a stop directly behind his cruiser, close enough to box him in. The look in his eyes shifted, not fear yet, but alertness. His hand hovered near his holster, reflex kicking in. The driver's side door opened slowly. Then, boots hit the ground. The sound was subtle but weighted, like gravity bent around the man stepping out. Elijah Franklin rose from the vehicle like a shadow made solid. Over 6 feet tall, broad shoulders, squared stance. Clean cut, composed, yet every fiber of him hummed with the potential for violence, restrained, but ready. He wore dark cargo pants and a fitted jacket, his military dog tags tucked just beneath his shirt. His eyes never left the scene in front of him. He walked forward like a man reclaiming something that had never stopped being his. Warren's partner noticed first and shifted uneasily. Who's that?" The question didn't need an answer. Elijah didn't break stride. He didn't yell. He simply called out, voice low but carrying like a shot across a canyon. "Let go of my son." Everything changed in an instant. Neighbors leaned closer to their windows. Officer Warren straightened, his hand now firmly on his belt. He turned to face the approaching figure, instincts torn between compliance and control. "Sir, this is police business," he said, voice firm but no longer so cocky. Elijah stopped just a few feet from them. His eyes flicked to Jamal, still standing tall, still uncuffed, and then to the hand holding his wrist. "Your business," Elijah said calmly, "is harassing my son." Warren blinked. He expected anger, yelling, maybe even threats. But this was worse. This was control. Power without a raised voice. Authority that wasn't granted by a badge but earned in ways Warren couldn't understand. The second officer stepped forward now, trying to defuse. "We had a report of a stolen bike," he explained quickly. "Kid fit the description. We were just following up." Elijah nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket with deliberate slowness, making sure both officers saw he wasn't pulling a weapon. He retrieved a black leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. Military ID. Government issued. The seal. The insignia. The photo. The rank. "You want to run mine too?" he asked. Warren stepped back slightly. His eyes widened. His mouth opened, then closed. His smirk was long gone now, replaced by the pale realization that this situation had spun far beyond his control. Elijah Franklin didn't need to raise his voice. He was the voice. The moment he spoke, the entire street listened, even the trees seemed to lean in. He stepped closer to Warren, closing the gap without aggression, only purpose. "Let me make this clear," he said. "You put your hands on my son. You accused him without cause. You laughed in his face when he told the truth." Warren tried to speak, but Elijah cut him off, not with volume, but with presence. "Now you're going to uncuff him, and then you're going to get in your car and leave." Jamal watched all of this in silence. He could feel the shift, not just in authority, but in energy. His father hadn't thrown a punch, hadn't made a threat. But both officers were now standing as if surrounded. The second cop nodded to Warren, urging him with a glance. Warren's hands moved slowly to his belt. No sudden movements now. He unfastened the cuffs. Jamal's wrist dropped, finally free. Elijah placed a firm hand on Jamal's shoulder. "You okay?" Jamal nodded, but his throat felt tight. As the cops returned to their cruiser, Warren muttered something under his breath. But Elijah heard it. He always heard everything. "What was that?" Warren didn't respond. The cruiser pulled away, red lights slowly fading into the night. And just like that, the show was over. Curtains down. But the lesson hung in the air like smoke. Jamal looked up at his father. Strong, silent, steady. For the first time, he understood. His father's real power wasn't just in what he could do. It was in what he chose not to. The patrol car disappeared down the block, taillights fading like a bad memory. Silence reclaimed the street. It wasn't peace, it was the stillness after a storm, the kind that made you hesitate before breathing again. Jamal stood motionless, his freed wrist still tingling from the pressure of the cuffs. He didn't know whether to cry or scream or just collapse into his father's arms. He did none of those. Instead, he just looked at Elijah, who stood beside him like a granite monument. Solid. Unmoving. The neighbors who had peeked out from behind blinds slowly retreated. Curtains fell shut like stage props. No one came outside. No one asked if Jamal was okay. No one said a damn thing. Because that's how it always was. Elijah gave Jamal's shoulder a gentle squeeze, just enough to say, "I'm here. You're safe. Come on," he said, voice low. "Let's go home." As they walked down the sidewalk, the echo of the confrontation still clung to the air. The tension hadn't broken, it had simply been redirected, absorbed by the quiet dignity of a father and his son. And with every step, Jamal felt something heavy lift from his chest, replaced by something stronger. Pride, respect, and a sobering sense of reality. They walked in silence for a while, the kind that didn't need words. Elijah's stride was steady, military precise, but his eyes kept darting to Jamal, watching, measuring. Not for injury, but for damage. "You did good," Elijah said finally. Jamal looked up, surprised. "I didn't do anything. You stood your ground. That's not nothing." Jamal shrugged. "You showed up. That's what made him back off." Elijah stopped walking, turned to face him. "Listen to me," he said, squatting down to Jamal's eye level. "You were already strong before I showed up. My job wasn't to give you strength, it was to remind them you already had it." Jamal's brows furrowed, unsure how to respond. "You think this was the first time I dealt with someone like him?" Elijah asked. "No. But every time it happens, I have two choices, rage or restraint. Tonight, I chose restraint. Because you were watching." That landed hard. Jamal had always thought of his dad as indestructible, like a superhero in camo. But now he saw something deeper, control. The kind of control that took more strength than any fight. And for the first time, he understood that his dad wasn't just fighting for him. He was teaching him. As they turned the corner onto their block, Jamal finally asked what had been eating at him since the moment the cruiser pulled away. "Why is it always like this?" Elijah sighed, not a tired sigh, but the kind that carries the weight of too many answers, none of which feel complete. "It's not always," he said. "But it's often enough. That cop didn't even give me a chance. He just looked at me and decided." Elijah nodded. "They don't see you, son. They see what they've been taught to fear. A shadow. A threat. Not a kid coming home from basketball practice." Jamal looked down at his sneakers, still dusty from the court. "I didn't even do anything." "You don't have to," Elijah said, quietly. "That's what I've tried to protect you from. But I can't shield you from every look, every suspicion, every accusation. What I can do is prepare you." Jamal looked up. "For what?" "For a world that needs proof before it gives you respect." That answer burned. Because it was true. And unfair. And permanent. But Jamal also realized something else. His father had been living with that truth his whole life, and still stood tall. That meant he could, too. The street lamps buzzed quietly above them, throwing long shadows across the pavement. Jamal and Elijah walked side by side, neither rushing the moment. It was just a walk. A normal, quiet walk through a quiet neighborhood. But Jamal saw everything differently now. The houses looked the same, but felt colder. The street felt longer. Every flicker of a porch light or sway of a curtain carried weight now. "This is still our home," Elijah said, as if reading his mind. "Don't let them make you feel like a stranger." Jamal didn't respond right away. He was still thinking about how quickly things had escalated. How the cop never even asked for his name. Just assumed. "I'm not scared," Jamal said softly. "I know you're not," Elijah replied. "But don't be reckless either. Bravery isn't about yelling back. It's about knowing when to speak and when to stand still. Sometimes the quietest moment says the most." Jamal took that in. This walk wasn't just about getting home. It was about carrying the weight of what had happened, and still choosing to walk with your head high. That was the lesson. That was the legacy. They reached their driveway just as the night fully settled. The stars peeked through the haze of city light, silent witnesses to a day that had ended very differently than it began. Elijah unlocked the door, but paused before going inside. "I know that wasn't easy," he said. "But I need you to remember something." Jamal turned to him. "You don't owe them anything," Elijah said firmly. "Not a smile. Not an explanation. Not even proof. You know who you are. That's enough." Jamal nodded. He felt something shift inside, like a puzzle piece clicking into place. His father wasn't just preparing him for future encounters, he was giving him armor. Not to fight with, but to live with. As they stepped into the house, the warmth of home wrapped around them. And in that moment, Jamal understood. His father's strength wasn't in his badge, his title, or even his intimidating presence. It was in how he carried himself. Calm. Unbending. Unshakable. That night, as Jamal lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he wasn't replaying the cop's smirk or the cuffs or the questions. He was remembering how his dad walked onto that street like he owned it. And how, from that moment on, so would he.